Memphis. Nothing but Memphis. Everywhere we go, it's Memphis.
Welcome to On the Bluff, a Bluff City Media audio podcast. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Kenny Stubblefield and Christian Fowler. Now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the inaugural episode of On the Bluff, a Bluff City Media audio and video podcast. And I'm excited, man, because I got my homie back with me, man. Christian Fowler has joined the crew, and we're going to be doing this podcast together, man. Christian, how's it going, man?
Everything's good. I'm lucky that we got a dry run last week, or right. I might be a little rustier right now. So I think I got a little bit back into the swing of things. But if I make some mistakes, slip up on some words or some stats, I think I need at least a little bit of a grace period, maybe a 2-week grace period, and then start firing away at me.
Let's go, man. It's been a minute. Obviously, Christian and I have done a lot of stuff in the past together. I'm excited. We got him off the retirement bus. He's the Barry Sanders of Memphis sports media. He, in his prime, decided to walk away, but we got him back. I'm excited, man. Y'all know, man, Christian's the best in the city at what he does. So I'm excited to get him back on here and do his thing. Christian, man, we got a lot to talk about. Obviously, this podcast is going to be dropping on Tuesday afternoon, right before the Tigers play against St. Louis in St. Louis. The Tiger basketball team plays their second game of the year, coming off of a victory last week against Vanderbilt in Nashville. So we got a lot to talk about. I wanted us to start talking about basketball, getting into the Memphis Tiger basketball team and what's going on, what you've seen, what we're excited about. But before we do that, we got to talk about recruiting first, man. Penny has obviously very clearly shown once again that he is a force to be reckoned with on the recruiting trail. Right now he has got, let's count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players committed. One of those 6 has signed his national letter of intent, and Carl Charon-Fant, the hard commits that he has: Mikey Williams, J.J. Taylor, Ty-laur Johnson, Ryan Forrest, and David Tubeck. Christian, what are your thoughts, man? Like, as you saw all this kind of unfolding, there was kind of a flurry of commitments and signings and things like that. Like, what do you think about the 2023 class that he has so far?
It's kind of what we've grown accustomed to with Penny when it comes to recruiting high school players. Like, it feels like the majority of the year, everybody's sitting back and waiting and holding their breath on when are these guys gonna come, who's it gonna be, and then out of nowhere it strikes. And that's, I'm just straight off the top of the head from memory, that feels like how it's been every single recruiting class. Obviously, minus last year where he chose to go pretty heavy in the transfer portal. So it was obviously a good week and a half to get all those commitments. So I know there are very few things in this world that excite Memphis fans more than basketball recruiting. So I know the Memphis fans have been all over the place, and the emotions have been all over the place the last week and a half or so. But obviously, some big time guys with Mikey Williams and J.J. Taylor coming in. I know those are. I mean, Mikey Taylor is probably the most high profile basketball player of all time. Honestly.
I mean, it's him, and what's crazy is, like, last year's class, Amani Bates was one of the most, I mean, he's the next KD. He's, 14 years old, 15 years old on magazines. And now you got Mikey Williams. He's got 3.5 million subscribers on Instagram, whose highlight packages are everywhere, all over the internet. These last 2 classes, he's gotten 2 guys that are extremely high profile.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Amani Bates, and Amani was like, man, we've been hearing about Amani since he was in 8th grade as a basketball player, but like Mikey Williams has taken over as a social media sensation for the past 3 years. And obviously Amani's videos and highlights and stuff were blowing it up, but like Mikey, it's his personality and, his social media savvy. And I'm sure that comes from people in his family or, just from general recognition of this is the way things are going. So he got on that wave pretty early and has built a huge follower base for himself. And obviously what you do on the court matters more than, your online persona, but it's always good to bring more eyes to the program, not only from fans and from national media, but also from players. because I'm pretty sure 99.9% of high school basketball players know who Mikey Williams is, and to see him go to Memphis is like, well, if they're not recruiting me or I'm not looking at them right now, maybe I should, because obviously it's good enough for this guy, and why not? So I think it is pretty cool that Penny's able to connect with those kind of guys. And, there aren't many coaches in college basketball that can connect with those high profile guys as good as Penny. And I think, that's a huge reason why he gets guys like James Wiseman and Monty Bates and now Mikey Williams and then JJ Taylor coming with Mikey Williams is another good get. And the class is built very quickly, but it's top 5 in the country right now, which is where you want to be.
Well, absolutely. I think one of the sneakier players that, Mikey obviously is going to attract a lot of attention based on his, like you described it, his public persona, his social media following, but having the opportunity to kind of really study Ty-laur Johnson's game. He's a point guard out of St. Benedict Prep in Newark, New Jersey. He is a 4-star, nationally ranked at 66, by 247 Sports. And there's a massive connection between the newest assistant coach for the University of Memphis and Andy Borman, who coached his Ty-laur Johnson's AAU program, the team that Ty-laur Johnson played for. I think Ty-laur, everybody expected nationally, I think everybody expected him to go to NC State, but when Andy Borman got here to Memphis, I think there was a kind of a shifting and turning of the tide, and Ty-laur was actually here on an unofficial for, I think it was the first exhibition game against CBU. And, the rumors started picking up that he was, seriously considering Memphis. And if you see Ty-laur Johnson's game, if you see the way he plays, man, he is a really, he's a departure, I think, from previous point guards that Penny Hardaway has gone after. But he is a scrappy, intense, very shifty distributor, defender, who can shoot the ball pretty well when he gets hot. His statistics aren't great from the three-point line, but in terms of his ability to score, his ability to finish in the paint, his ability to defend, to kind of lead the team, he is a perfect, I think, college point guard that Penny is looking to not become the next Penny Hardaway in the NBA, but to lead the Memphis Tigers, once he gets here on campus.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's like, this is a guy that I don't think many people are projecting, obviously, with him being ranked, past the 50s as a one and done kind of guy. This feels like a guy that Penny wants to bring in and develop and have him for 2, 3, 4 years as the team's floor general, which we haven't really seen that much since Penny got here. So I love the pickup. I think it's definitely a big pickup. And if you look around social media and stuff where all the fans are obviously talking about this recruiting class and what's being built, I think, the people that see the Mikey Williams name are obviously attracted to that, but the people that are really digging in and going and watching film and seeing what these guys bring to the table, Ty-laur Johnson is who people are the most excited about up to this point, because they realize that this is something that shifts a program for the time that player's there, if he pans out to what we think he's going to be. So I love the pickup. I love what Penny's doing. We've seen kind of that shift from the big flashy, everybody one and done, to right now what he's putting on the floor is a very veteran heavy team. And it looks like he wants to stay in that realm. Now, obviously, does he want high-level talented freshmen? Absolutely, because you have to have those game-changing guys to be a perennial top team, but you also need the guys that are there for 3, 4 years that are going to be leaders and that are going to change. I don't want to say that the culture needs changed at Memphis, because I don't think it does, but they kind of change what's going on the floor. They're kind of an extension of the coaching staff on the floor, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and that's the kind of player that I believe a lot of people and Penny and the coaching staff believe Ty-laur Johnson can be.
Well, you mentioned a second ago about a culture change, and I don't think necessarily that, and you said it, not that the culture needs changing. Penny changed the culture after last year. He absolutely said from the very beginning of the offseason that he was going to revamp his roster, that he was going to be very heavy in the transfer portal, that he was going to go get veteran guys that have played in other programs, guys that fit what the Tigers need, but also have that experience and guys that know that guys that can fit well together. I mean, did he get anybody in? I don't think he had one single high school recruit last year commit to Memphis. Everything was through the portal or through players that were already on the team. And, specifically guys like, Jonathan Lawson, who we didn't see last year because he was redshirted, but there definitely seems to be a shift again. And one of the things, Christian, I think that we are, both of us have come to understand over the last few years of covering Penny Hardaway is to never really try to guess what Penny Hardaway is trying to do. Like, what is he doing? But I'm going to ask you to try to do that right now. He's went into the transfer portal, got the number one transfer in the entire portal last year in Kendrick Davis, filled in around Kendrick, built a team around Kendrick, bringing back DeAndre Williams, bringing back a few other players like Malcolm Dandridge, Jaden Hardaway, his son, Alex Lomax decided to come back. But now in the very next class, he's filling that roster up with high school players again. What do you think? Is this something that we can expect from Penny moving forward? Or is this something that like, what do you think he's trying to do by going straight transfer portal, now high school players being recruited for the next class right after?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different layers to it. And like you said, this is the best guess at it because we never know what Penny's doing. We never know exactly what he's got dialed up and what he's thinking. But just from the outside looking in, what it seems like is this could have been a pretty down year, right? If you look at what was left over after all the guys that left either, via the transfer portal or through the draft, this could have been a big transitional year of, maybe they bring in a few lower rated guys in the 2022 class. And it's like, okay, we're going to have to wait a couple years because we don't have those. We don't have Jalen Duren and Amani Bates, those guys that can come in and get you to the tournament in year one. So it could have been a bridge year. And instead of doing that, Penny was like, no, let's just go get veteran guys. Let's go get Kendrick Davis, the best player available in the transfer portal, who is a program changer. Even if he's only a 1-year rental, he can still, take a team as far as the pieces around him are willing to go. And so getting guys like that, getting Elijah McCadden, getting Kennedy, getting Cal, like getting these guys that can come in and contribute immediately, and pairing those with the guys that have, kind of the stalwarts that have been here, DeAndre Williams, Malcolm Dandridge, Alex Lomax, Jaden Hardaway, those guys that are still going to play a lot of meaningful minutes this year, and pairing that together and saying, instead of trying to scrap this and be like patchwork quilt of we've got, really veteran guys like Lomax, Williams, and Malcolm have been there for a long time, and pairing those with these young up and coming guys is just probably not going to work. It's probably not going to be the most effective way to go about this individual year. So let's bring this in. Let's do it this way. And we know we're going to lose a lot next year off the rip. They know they're going to lose a lot. They've got a lot of seniors. They've got a lot of veteran guys. So they're going to lose a lot. So you have to inject some youth talent into this. And he's obviously done that with the guys that they've gotten in the 2023 class. And then I think he probably does want to plug some transfers out there, even if some of these guys that are currently on the team stick around. I think he likes the feel of the veterans and the young guys. I think it's always been that way. It's like the way that it's fallen once the guys have gotten on campus is like, man, we've got to play these young guys. Yeah. And it's been difficult to figure out rotations. It's been difficult to figure out egos. It's been difficult to pair guys with very different play styles because some of these veteran guys that have been here have more of a methodical approach, have more of a defensive-minded approach. And then some of the guys that you're bringing in are, straight AAU style. Like, let's just run the floor, let's run these dudes to death. And Penny makes no bones about that he wants to do that offensively, but it's like it hasn't meshed properly yet. We haven't seen kind of that combination work yet. So I think we're seeing him try something a little bit different this year, and I love it. I'm all for it. I think it has the potential to be the best year at Memphis under Penny Hardaway if things, fall accordingly. So I love the fact that he not only planned substantially for this year with the guys that he brought in, but now he's really setting the future. He's getting guys like Ty-laur Johnson who more than likely aren't going to be one and dones. He's getting guys like Sharon Fant who more than likely aren't going to be one and dones, and Forrest and all these guys that he is bringing in. They're program builders. They're guys that'll be here for 2 to 4 years and really help you have sustained success that we see teams. I always think of Michigan State when I think of 100%. This mesh. When I think of, we'll bring in 2 or 3 top players, but we really, our middle 3 or 4 guys are the most important because they're going to be the ones leading the team the next year and the next year and the next year. And so it's always that mesh of young and veteran. Yeah. And the top teams in the country do so. And I think Penny's really zoning in on the way to do that is what it feels like to me. So that's my best guess.
That's a great guess. I mean, again, none of us can sit here and pretend to know what Penny Hardaway is thinking and doing. We can just kind of read the tea leaves and say, you get a guy like Mikey Williams, and let's just be frank about Mikey. Mikey has a large social media presence. People have been talking about him forever and a year since he was a baby, playing basketball. But Mikey is not one of those guys that's going to come in and just set the college world on fire in terms of his skill set, in terms of what he can do on the floor. Is Mikey a good player? Absolutely. Is he talented? Absolutely. I mean, you don't get ranked top 22 in the country and not be good to be a 5-star on 247 Sports. Like you don't, he's a good player.
I think it's very, very similar to Bronny James personally.
Speak on that a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, same thing with Bronny. Like, I don't know. That I've always hated this. Like, I really don't like the Bleacher Report and House of Highlights stuff. I don't like it. It drives me crazy because you have all these people that think, this guy's the best in the country or this guy's the best in the country just because those social media sites are the ones that portray those guys all the time. Like you've seen Bronny.
What was that kid from New York or Florida, Julian kid that they were propping up so much on? Was it Ball is Life or something like that? You remember that little short kid?
I'm not sure.
Anyway, the kid
I know there was the guy from IMG too. Noah Farrakhan. You always saw Noah Farrakhan, and he ended up, going to college and really not doing much of anything. Honestly, he fell off before his senior year, and then but they still post about him because we posted about him 3 years ago. Anyway,
because you know who his teammate is now. He's at Eastern Michigan with Amani.
Right.
Killing it. And I'm telling you, man, Noah Farrakhan looked awesome in that game against Michigan.
He's playing ball now, but they were thinking when he was a sophomore and a junior in high school that he was going to come into college and light the world on fire.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's just the social media presence. And I can't stand that because I think not the wrong guys, but some of the guys that really deserve it don't end up getting their flowers. Mm-hmm. Like a guy like Jalen Duren, you didn't see nearly as much about him when he was in high school as guys like Bronny. And it's just because of the name value. And it's fine. It is what it is. It's like the day and age we live in, and I get it. And I'm not crapping on Mikey or Bronny or Amani or any of these guys that have been like social media sensations at all. But there is a different perception outside of the real deal basketball world when it comes to those guys. The 100%. Casual fan would probably think Mikey Williams was the number 1 player in the country or Bronny James was the number 1 player in the country. And they're not. They're not the number 1. They are good. I mean, they are very good players. I believe Bronny's a high 4 or 5-star. And like you said, Mikey's number 22 in the country and a 5-star. And I'm not saying that I don't think he's going to be a good player at all. I'm just saying those are the comparisons that I have because that's what you see all the time. So, you got guys, you got guys that are legit going to go be one and done and dominate college basketball next year that get no flowers because they don't necessarily have any name value. But that's my kind of comparison for it.
But a guy like Mikey, though, if you watch highlights, if you watch games of it, not just highlights, if you watch games of his, the way that he's able to effectively move around on the floor, the way that he gets the ball in the mid-range, his ability to jump and separate himself from mid-range jump shots, his ability to get to the basket, his defensive, presence, his passing presence. Like he plays on a team in San Diego with JJ Taylor where they run legitimate sets on the floor. And you see Mikey Williams running those sets. You see J.J. Taylor running those sets. They are running that offense and getting the best available shot. So you're going to look at a Mikey Williams game and say, has he fallen off because he's not getting those like crazy dunks that you see on Ball is Life or Instagram or all these little reels and things like that? I think Mikey Williams has turned into a pretty damn good basketball player at this point, who is going to come into a team which we now know is going to be Memphis, and is going to be an effective player because he knows how to run within a system. And that's all that Penny cares about. Like Penny
no more
about
hero
it,
ball. No more hero ball.
And he talked about it in a press conference. I think it was after one of the exhibition games. Someone asked him a question about playing time. No. It was after the Vanderbilt game when they asked about KO. Because KO played 6 minutes in the first half and then didn't see the floor in the second half. Right. And someone asked him about that question or asked him about that. And he said, listen, I am done giving pity minutes. I am done giving players minutes because I'm trying to soothe whatever. And he wasn't specifically talking about KO being upset or anything like that. He
was making a statement to the media, to the team, to the city that he's running this show.
This is his show, and he's not beholden to anybody on minutes, and he's going to play who he thinks is going to play. Oh, no, it wasn't KO. He was talking about Jonathan Lawson because Jonathan didn't play in the game against Vandy. And they asked him that question. And he said, listen, man, I'm not giving minutes just because I'm supposed to give somebody minutes. I am going to give minutes to the person who I think is going to help me win a game. And that's what I see.
And that's how it should be.
100% how it should be. And I think that was the issue that he got himself into last year with that roster, was he had too many outsiders, egos inside the locker room that were saying, I need this, and I'm expecting to be this guy. And I think he just got tired of that. And I think he's done with that. And I think what we're kind of totally switching subjects here, but I think what we've seen a kind of a development in Penny Hardaway is he has now become a full-fledged college coach instead of being an NBA factory like he described when he first got here. He wanted the University of Memphis basketball program to be a place where one-and-doners could come in and get better and go straight to the league, right? And I think what he's doing right now with this class in particular, with this 2023 class, with going through to the portal and kind of revamping his entire roster in 2022, is he's saying, man, I'm going to get the best college program I can have. I'm going to get the best players that are going to help the University of Memphis win games.
Yeah, and that goes back to my Michigan State example. Honestly, like, you don't see Michigan State necessarily turn out the same amount of talent that Kentucky and Kansas and Duke do, but Michigan State is always right there.
100%.
But let's transition off of that a little bit, because you did talk about minutes and the way that Vanderbilt game played out. So let's hit this very briefly and then do a quick preview of the St. Louis game coming up on Tuesday night. So Vanderbilt, Memphis goes in as, I believe, 2.5-point favorites, get a pretty sizable win on the road, first game of the year. I think I told you this, ESPN's Basketball Power Index actually had Memphis with only like a 35 or 40% chance to win that game. So I know it's not a top 25 team. It's not necessarily the most flashy game in the world, but I think a good first win of the season in the first game. Just quickly, let's talk about a couple of the takeaways from that and kind of how we see those things playing out moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, having had the opportunity to go and see the two exhibition games in Memphis prior to them starting the season off legit against Vanderbilt, I was slightly concerned a little bit, Christian. I'm not going to lie. There were some things that concerned me about the front court in particular. DeAndre Williams coming back was a huge get for Penny to come back and play his final year in college. I think that there was a perception that because of his age and because of, that he might have had, tried to play maybe overseas or go do something like that. I don't think anybody thought that DeAndre was going to be an NBA guy last year, but getting him to come back and play his final season was a huge get. But the thing is with DeAndre is that he's a different kind of player than what you would normally see in a front court. He's not your banging, like physical, super physical big man. He's kind of one of those dudes that can stretch the floor, blow past a big man that can't keep up with them, shoot the three, Yeah, and one of the things that he's benefited from is he's always had a big man in the paint with him that has been able to kind of clog the lane, defend the rim, play with force, get rebounds, things like that. Guys like Moussa Cisse, and then obviously last year with Jalen Duren. I mean, Jalen Duren was just unbelievably awesome. Like, he was just so good. Anyway, I was concerned coming into this Vanderbilt game that will the Tigers be able to, especially in the front court, play with a force that honestly in those first 2 exhibition games I didn't see. I didn't see a level of attack and a force and physical presence that I've come to expect from Penny Hardaway teams. Malcolm Dandridge is a fine player, been with Memphis for a few years now, but Malcolm is that guy that he can get physical at times, but a lot of times he will kind of fade to the background a little bit. Chandler Lawson is just not a physical big man. KO, who is has made just unbelievable highlights on YouTube with his jumping ability, like head above the rim, arms at the top of the backboard, but he just hasn't played ball long enough to be really, really gifted and really, good at and so that was concerned about that. But I was impressed with the way they played, to be honest with you, man. I really feel like the Tigers came in, especially in that front court, and set a tone very quickly in that Vanderbilt game and made it very difficult for Vanderbilt to be successful.
Yeah, a couple things real quick. Something you and I talked about is the rotations, and you mentioned it briefly. It looks like Penny's finally sticking to his guys. I think he only played, it was 8, correct? Only played 8 guys.
He played 9. He played 9 total, but KO only had 6 in the first half.
In the first half. Yeah, so the rotation being shortened, that's not something that we're used to seeing from Penny Hardaway. It usually takes half of the season for him to figure out more of the rotations and more fine-tune that, and it feels like he had a plan going into the season, which I love that. I think that offers consistency from the start. I think it lets guys know where they stand from the start. And if they want to work into those minutes, if they want to find their way into the rotation or unseat somebody that is starting, then they know they've really got to work to get there. And they're not going to work to get there in games. They've got to bust their butt in practice, which makes that team better every day. Sounds like coach speak, sounds cliche, but it's completely and utterly the truth. So I love the fact that we saw the rotation shorten from the jump this season. I know that's something that's aggravated a lot of fans. And here we are after the first game, seeing a pretty short rotation with guys playing a lot of minutes. Love the defensive mindset of this team. I don't think that's a shock to anybody. It's right. The way that this team has played since Penny Hardaway came in. Now you bring in a coaching staff that has Frank Haith, Andy Borman, and Faraji Phillips, with Frank Haith being my favorite hire that Penny's ever made personally on the staff. I love it because Frank Haith's teams gave Penny so much trouble, even though in every single game that Memphis played against Tulsa while Frank Haith was there, Memphis was the more talented team. They always gave Penny trouble. And I think that kind of defensive-minded coach to go along with Penny, who we know is a great defensive coach, in those big games against those top players and in those big moments, if you're competing for a conference championship or if you're in the tournament, guys like Frank Haith and the way that he sees the defensive side of the court and the way that he sees matchups, that gives you 2 or 3 games that you probably shouldn't win with a guy that's that good on the defensive end of the floor as a coach. Anything else I got off the top of my head? Like I said, love the defense, love the rotations. Kendrick Davis played very well, as we all expected. The offense goes the way Kendrick Davis goes. You mentioned DeAndre Williams. A lot of back and forth on him. What's it going to be? Where is he going to go? What's he going to do? He comes out and he leads the team in points in game 1. So Kenny, I do want to real quick, let's talk a little bit about November and December. Let's kind of set the stage for the next month and a half. Obviously, we'll be doing podcasts throughout this time, but it just feels right now, since it is the beginning of the season, to kind of lay this out, get a little bit of a lay of the land. So Memphis on Tuesday night, as we mentioned, will play at St. Louis. St. Louis currently 3-point favorites. ESPN Basketball Power Index gives them a 67.4% chance to win. As we know, St. Louis is always a well-coached team and just a quality basketball team. It feels like every single year.
Yep.
Quickly, Kenny, what does Memphis need to do to go into St. Louis and get a really quality win in the second game of the season?
Well, I mean, I think the St. Louis, their offense kind of runs off of really two guys, and that's Yuri Collins, the point guard, and Javonte Perkins, the shooting guard. And I would say this, like if you look at their box scores over the last couple of games, they are they play quite a few players, but they're, in terms of the heavy minutes on the team, St. Louis has like 8 guys that they play. Their starting 5 is going to play a majority of the time. Yuri Collins is a guy he's 6 foot, 190. I see Alex Lomax all over him. That seems like the perfect Alex Lomax matchup. Yuri Collins is a guy that I think he's averaging right now only, 12, 13 points a game right now, but he's had 13 and 14 assists in the first 2 games of the year. So we're talking about a guy who is the ball's in his hands a lot, shoots the ball a lot, or shoots the ball, gets pretty decent shots, and then is able to distribute. So, for the Tigers to come out and be effective, I think, against this team, they're going to have to dominate. Well, not really dominate, but they're going to have to really show a physical nature on defense very quickly, establish their identity on the defensive side of the floor against St. Louis. I mean, obviously they're playing in St. Louis. It's going to be a road game, another tough road game to start off the season. And, it's going to be a game where they're going to have to absolutely establish their presence on the defensive side of the floor to be able to come away with a win in St. Louis.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it feels like same thing. St. Louis is like different players, very similar team every year.
Right.
Like they're not necessarily an elite scoring team, but they have guys that can get buckets, and they're always pretty sound defensively. They're pretty good on the glass. It just like is really a copy paste kind of thing for St. Louis. So I think we will get to see, like, will Malcolm Dandridge be that enforcer for an entire game? And if so, that's obviously huge, and they need him to be that in this game. They need a physical presence down low in this game. Gibson Jimerson, great 3-point shooter for St. Louis, is somebody that in 2 games this year is averaging 19 points per game. Can you shut down that guy that's going to be their guy that can shoot from deep? Are you going to be able to shut him down?
How did I miss Gibson Jimerson? I know that name so well. How did I forget to mention him? Thank you for mentioning Gibson Jimerson. Thank you.
But that's a microwave scorer type guy. And it's, to me, especially early in the season, it's always interesting to see how a team slows that kind of player down. What does the perimeter defense look like when you're spread out and you've got a guy like Yuri Collins and you've also got a guy like Gibson Jimerson? So very interesting, intriguing matchup for Memphis on Tuesday night. So let me pull up the schedule here. So you go from St. Louis to VCU. You got a game against VCU
in Memphis. First home game
Memphis.
Of the year. Yep.
Seton Hall.
Again.
And then you get North Alabama. So that's your November schedule.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
They're going, the Seton Hall game is an ESPN Events Invitational. They're starting off the Invitational against
Seton Hall. Yeah.
Then they play 2 more games at least in Orlando. So they've got Seton Hall, then the winner of Oklahoma, Nebraska, and then if they win that game, they play either Florida State, Stanford, Ole Miss, or Siena. So they've got three games in Orlando immediately after that initial home opener in against VCU.
Right. So that's what, and the reason I sped through that is because I wanted to get to December. So I did not mean to glance over that, but I did.
Sorry.
No, I'm not saying to you. I'm saying to the people listening that I just glanced over that because I was excited to get to December.
I know. December's crazy.
December is going to be crazy, but that is, and I thank you for stopping me and slowing me down on that, because that ESPN Invitational will be test after test after test. It will be quality teams all the way throughout. It's always a good environment to see where your team is, because it has that tournament style environment. So those are always perfect to see where you're at, what you look like in a tournament environment, see what you need to work on moving forward, because it is early in the season. So Memphis, really, like I said, they start with a pretty quality schedule at the beginning. They're not playing any world beaters necessarily. They're just playing good, solid teams.
Right.
That are like perennial tournament type teams, perennial tournament contender teams.
Oh, yeah.
Then you go Ole Miss,
Mhm.
first game in December, Little Rock, and then you have currently 3 consecutive top 25 teams. You go Auburn, Bama, and A&M, who just got into the top 25 this week.
Right.
So you talk about a test and seeing where a team is at. I think we'll obviously know a lot more about this team at that time because we're only 1 game in right now, and we get to see them in Orlando and see what they do in Orlando. And it's weird to say you kind of have a defining stretch of the season in December because you're not even in the conference play yet. But man, that's going to be fun. That's going to be a whole heck of a lot of fun to see Memphis play. And who knows if those 3 teams will be ranked in the top 25 at that time. But regardless, 3 of the better teams in the country, we get to see Memphis match up with relatively early in the season.
I mean, that Auburn game, obviously December 10th in Atlanta, is going to be awesome. I mean, the holiday hoops giving, I love that tournament every year. I love the holiday college basketball, tournaments they have going on. That's going to be such a fun game, man. Penny Hardaway, Bruce Pearl. I mean, that's going to be so much fun. And then again, like you said, that December 13th game in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. I mean, the Tigers were reeling last year coming into the Alabama game in Memphis. And that felt like the game where they really, you finally kind of caught a glimpse in that Alabama game of, oh man, this team could be so good. If they could get it all together, they could be so good. And again, man, like it's just Auburn and Alabama back to back. And then, like you said, that December 17th game in Memphis at night against Texas A&M, I don't care there's no reason to believe that all 3 of those teams won't still be ranked in the top 25. And truth be told, the Tigers might be ranked in the top 25 at that point. If they play the way that the way the schedule is kind of pushing itself out to be, like if they can get past St. Louis tomorrow, or if they can get past St. Louis tonight, then there's no reason to say that all 3 of those games aren't going to be ranked opponents, playing against each other. And that is
top
just
25 matchups.
I mean, that is such a cool December for Tiger fans. And that's just not normal for what Penny has done in the past. Like, we haven't seen a schedule like this in the first 2 months of the year. It's crazy, right?
Yeah. I think it's been, I think what it's been the past few years is you have those games sprinkled in, but they're between like really bad teams, right? So you'll have an Ole Miss in there. You'll have a Georgia in there when Anthony Edwards was there. But you're playing very, very winnable games that you're favored by double digits in between. And this is pretty killer after killer, other than, the North Alabama game at the end of November. Other than that, like, these are going to be tight games. You start off the season, like I said, 2.5-point favorites over Vanderbilt, 3-point dogs against St. Louis. I believe they'll be favored against VCU. And then in that tournament against Seton Hall and stuff, all those are going to be close games. I would say all those will probably be within 3 to 5 point favorites. So we'll know what this team is made of pretty early, and that doesn't determine the season one way or the other. If they're undefeated at the end of December, it doesn't mean they're going to win a national championship. And if they've got 2 or 3 losses at the end of December, that doesn't mean that they're doomed. And that's, that's the fun of college sports in general. But I think it's going to be very interesting.
You mentioned earlier, you brought up Michigan State, and this schedule, these first 2 months, feels like a Michigan State Tom Izzo schedule, where you look up at the very beginning of the season and Michigan State is playing everybody. Their first 10 games are against the top 10 opponents, top 10 teams in the country. And they lose some of those games. They might get 1 win or 2 wins. And it's like, man, Michigan, is Tom Izzo losing it? Is Michigan State really not that good this year? And then you look up in the tournament in February and March, and you're like, oh my gosh, Michigan State they've won 23 games this year. They've gone on a massive streak.
They go run through their conference. And I think Penny's seen that. I think Penny's seen, losing those games to inferior conference opponents. And it, he could believe, and it could be, I don't know one way or the other, that they weren't prepared going into conference slate because they weren't necessarily playing a tough schedule in November and December. So, just food for thought. Who knows?
Yeah, they just
we
haven't
don't
been tested
read
like
minds
that.
or read the future. Yeah, no, they haven't. So, I love the way he scheduled it. I think it's what he wants to do. It's what he's been trying to do for years, and he's got it. So let's see how they fare throughout.
Absolutely. So again, this podcast is coming out on Tuesday. Tigers will be playing and facing off against St. Louis in St. Louis. Like Christian said earlier, they're a 3.5-point underdog right now. But that is going to be a fun game, a tough game. I think we're going to see some pretty awesome backcourt matchups in this game. And I think I'm excited to see what Kendrick Davis and Alex Lomax and Keontae Kennedy and Elijah McCadden can do. I think it's going to be fun against that backcourt of St. Louis.
So, Kenny, let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit of Memphis football before we get out of here. Tigers are coming off of a win over Tulsa on Thursday night. Covered the spread, which is always a good sign. It wasn't necessarily the prettiest game, but they won to get their 5th win of the season. They played North Alabama this week, and if they win, they are bowl eligible. So I know it hasn't been the perfect season, but they're currently 5-5. They win this game, 6-5 and bowl eligible. Talk to me about these last 2 games really quickly. Like I said, North Alabama, SMU. You can either end the season 6-6 at 500 or 7-5. So, I mean, I think that I'm not trying to look past North Alabama here, but I'm kind of looking past North Alabama here.
Well, yes, and I think that look past North Alabama in terms of the actual end result. To me, this game is really important for the Tigers because I think it's a get-right game right before they play against SMU. Because this SMU game is going to be difficult. They're going to Dallas. They're playing a potent, and I know you are a massive Tanner Mordecai fan. You love that dude. And I know TJ and Trey over on Tigers Untapped, they love that dude too, especially TJ. He loves Tanner Mordecai. But this North Alabama game, on Saturday, it's going to be the final time the Tigers are going to be playing at Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium this year. I'm really wondering, at senior day, so there's going to be a lot of players that have been with the team for a very long time that are going to be, being what's the word I'm looking for, Christian?
Honored.
Thank you. Quindell Johnson, guys like Quindell Johnson, guys like Rodney Owens, guys like Wardalis Ducksworth, Zay Collins. One of the guys that I've just grown to really, really appreciate on that team is Jalen Allen. Guys like Jalen Allen are going to be, honored.
That's your dude.
That's my guy, man. So it's going to be an emotional day, I think, for most Tiger fans and for the Tiger players, because there's going to be a lot of guys that have been on the team for so long, which is, what's crazy, Christian, is most of those guys were either here 2018 or they were redshirted at 2019. 2019, the year that they played in the Cotton Bowl, the year that they went AAC championship, they got that. A lot of these players have stuck around. And if you listen to, conversations I've had with them over the offseason, they came back because they wanted to bring the Tigers back to where they were introduced to the Tiger program, and that's AAC championship, going to a big bowl. And I think this season, these last 2 seasons in particular, have been disappointments for the team, man. And so this is going to be an emotional day, I think, for Tiger fans and for the players against North Alabama. I don't think the win or the loss is really up in question. I think the Tigers should absolutely score at will against this team. But it's just going to be an emotional day, I think, for everybody.
So let's look past this North Alabama game a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Fingers crossed that's not a mistake. And let's talk about the way that Memphis can close this season out and what it does, if anything, for confidence, whatever, propelling this team forward in the next season. What does it do? What does the next 2 games do for Memphis?
I mean, obviously, I think it's really difficult, man, because I think that the Tigers, if everybody's being honest with themselves, this season will ultimately however it plays out will end up being a disappointing season based on expectations locally. Now, sometimes local expectations can be, a little bit can be a little bit looking through, rose-colored glasses, I guess. And I mean, you look at the national media, and most of them pick the Tigers to be 7th in the conference, 7-5, 6-6, for the year, which looks like it's going to end up being the case, obviously. But in terms of confidence for the team, man, obviously being able to go bowling is a huge deal. I mean, the team has specifically talked about, a lot of the players have specifically talked about that they don't want to break that streak of, since 2013, the Tigers have been bowl eligible every single year, and they don't want to break that streak. Obviously the disappointment is, I think most of the Tiger players that came back and guys that have played for this team for years came back with the expressed intent of bringing a championship back to University of Memphis. Well, that's not going to happen, obviously. In terms of confidence, man, I refuse to try to understand how fans are feeling about certain things. Obviously, if they go into Dallas and beat SMU and end the regular season at 7-5, I think there is a level of confidence that the staff and the team can take away, because what remains true, Christian, is that the Tigers are still an extremely young team. You look at a large portion of the players that have played this year, a lot of the players that have played, they would, in terms of age, the Tigers would rank as the 10th youngest team in the entire FBS. And so I think going into the off season, going into bowl practices and getting ready for a bowl game, being able to walk away 7-5, coming off of a win against SMU in Dallas, would be a huge confidence builder. To the fans, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how the fans are going to react, if they're going to still be on the, Fire Silverfield train or whatever. But I think for the staff and for the players, they'll be confident if they can come and beat North Alabama and then go into Dallas and beat SMU. I think they'll be confident going into the offseason.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, last question for you. We're going to project a little bit more than that. We're going to go a little further because it's fun. So, let's say Memphis beats North Alabama. Memphis goes to Dallas and beats SMU. Memphis wins a bowl game. Finish the season 8-5 with the bowl win. Success or no?
I think, are you talking about, is the program successful or was the season successful?
Was it a successful season if Memphis goes 8-5 with a bowl win?
I would say no, because of the expectations that the staff and the team had on what they were going to be able to do. I mean, one of the things that was very apparent to me in the offseason was that you really rarely hear Ryan Silverfield talking about his team in very specifics and kind of like what he's feeling about his team. During the offseason, Christian, he was very excited about what he was seeing out on the field. And so I think, do I deem it a success? No, because I don't think the staff and the team would deem it as a success. Do I think 8-5 with a bowl game win is a good season? Yes, because I think there is momentum, especially as they bring in, or as they're developing some of the younger players that are on the roster, on top of having some of the best recruiting classes Memphis has ever had. I think that there's a lot of momentum, and I think there's a lot of confidence going into the offseason. But in terms of success, no, I don't think it's a successful season because of the expectations that were placed on them within the program.
I would say if that happens, it's a successful season, because 2 weeks ago, if you would have told anybody that Memphis could finish this season 8-5 with a bowl win, and they were a diehard Memphis fan, they'd probably give you a healthy amount of money to get there. Memphis was just sitting at 4-5 going into the Tulsa game. So to win 4 games in a row and one of those being a bowl, I think that is successful. At least in a small sample size, because maybe it wasn't successful from the beginning of the season, but from what Memphis has done throughout the year to get to that point, a lot of people, a lot of fans I know have been really down in the dumps about it. That's being 8-5 with the bowl wins probably unfathomable to most people 2 or 3 weeks ago. So that's why I say it would be a success. I think it helps Ryan Silverfield out a lot if he can go out like that. I think that's a great way to end the season and kind of propel into the next year. It makes the headlines throughout the offseason way more positive to go out like that. Not that
headlines.
Yeah, it's much different. And not that the coaches and players put too much stock into that, but they do see it. Regardless of if it affects them or not, they do see it, and you'd much rather see positive stuff said than negative stuff, I would imagine. So I think it's possible. I don't think Memphis, is going to lose to North Alabama. That's for dang sure. So I think they're going to go to a bowl game, and last game of the season in Dallas, Memphis is going to give it their all. You know that. So anything could happen. SMU's not, the best team in the conference by any means. So it's not like they're an unbeatable team. Memphis can go beat them. They just got to get pressure on Tanner Mordecai, cover Rashee Rice, and maybe run the ball a little bit. And I think they can win that game, even on the road.
It's going to be a tough game. I mean, can the Tigers offense, which, at the very beginning of the season was kind of what people expected the Tiger offense to look like, what we've gotten used to, I think, over the last, few years. But it's definitely not been consistent throughout the year. I mean, you mentioned earlier the running game. The running game has been pretty much non-existent this year. There's no established running game in any game that I've seen the Tigers play, and I've seen them all. So it'll be interesting, man. Like, the Tigers are going to have to really come out against SMU and try to keep up with the high-powered SMU offense. I mean, SMU has an offense. They've had an offense for years, and I have a feeling for the Tigers to win, they're going to have to get they're going to have to score a lot to be able to beat SMU. So we'll see, man. We'll see. I know that the one thing I would say about the Tiger team is that they do not lack confidence. They believe that they can come out and win every game they play. And so they're going to come out against SMU, hopefully after a game against North Alabama where, we describe it as a get-right game, where they kind of practice some different things, work on some different things, get some game action on some sets that they might try to, bring out against SMU. But it's going to be a tough game. That SMU game to end the season is going to be tough. But again, if it's a winnable game, and if they can do that and then win a bowl game, I'll go with you, man. I'll call it successful.
I've swayed you.
You've swayed me because I agree with what you're saying. I mean, at the beginning of the year when they were 4-1, I think people were like, this could be, every game past this, there's going to be a rough stretch of games. The Houston ECU, Tulsa UCF games, those are going to be tough games, but they're all winnable. Well, they lose all four of those games. And so I think definitely there was a level of excitement at 4-1, and then just, man,
straight downhill.
So it'll be interesting.
Well, Kenny, I think that brings us to the end of episode 1 of On the Bluff. Man, feels weird, but it feels good. Excited to be back on a microphone talking about Memphis sports. Excited to be back with my guy, Kenny. It's been a long time, over a year since we've recorded a podcast together. So it feels good to be back at it. And we appreciate you guys for listening. We know this is only the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. And we hope we have hundreds and hundreds of episodes from here. But we will be back next week. Should have some basketball and some football to talk about, maybe even some recruiting to talk about. Kenny, you got anything else before we wrap up the first episode of On the Bluff?
One last thing, man. Bluff City Media, Bluff City NIL. It's a new thing that's being started. We're getting it off the ground. It's an opportunity for us to provide comprehensive coverage of Tiger athletics, at the same time providing opportunities for student athletes at the University of Memphis to make a little cash off their name, image, and likeness, man. And we're excited. We got a strong team that's being built up over here. And as Christian said, it's just the tip of the iceberg, man. We got so much planned. So y'all stay tuned. Follow us on all of our social medias, everything YouTube. Go check out YouTube. Go check out Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that kind of stuff. We're going to have a good time, man.
Yeah, and like you said, tip of the iceberg. So since it is the beginning, since we are at the forefront of this, go subscribe on YouTube. Go follow us on social platforms. Anything you can do to support and help us out, listen to the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, tell your friends about the podcast. It will be available on anywhere that you get your podcast, and also the video version, which Kenny and we're going to step up our game a little bit next week. This is just episode 1. So we're going to have a much higher quality video for YouTube next week. We just wanted to get this thing off the ground. So like I said, show us support, show us some love, help us any way you can, and we will see you back here next week.
Thank you for listening to On the Bluff. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and a comment wherever you download your podcasts. Head over to www.bluffcitynil.com, where you will find comprehensive coverage of Tiger athletics and how you can become a contributor. We'll see you back here next week.